I sit in my car outside TechFlow Innovations at 6 in the morning on launch day, watching security guards dump my personal belongings into the parking lot dumpster. My phone buzzes relentlessly with panicked messages from the development team asking where the critical deployment files are. I type a message to CEO Marcus Thornfield, 15 minutes until impact. My finger hovers over send as I remember yesterday's humiliation when VP Linda Garrett announced my termination for being too fast, too intense, while promoting her incompetent niece Sarah to lead the biggest product launch in company history. The irony burns through me like acid. 3 months earlier, I walked into TechFlow Innovations every morning with the confidence that comes from 5 years of flawless project deliveries. As senior software architect, I had built my reputation on solving impossible problems and delivering bulletproof systems ahead of schedule. The corner office with its view of downtown Portland felt like home, my dual monitors displaying elegant code that could handle millions of transactions without breaking a sweat. That Tuesday morning in March changed everything. I discovered a massive security vulnerability in our flagship client management system during routine maintenance. The authentication protocol had a critical flaw that could expose sensitive client data to anyone with basic hacking skills. My stomach dropped as I realized the scope of the problem. This was not a minor bug fix, but a fundamental architectural issue that required immediate attention. I spent the entire day documenting the vulnerability, creating detailed reports with specific examples of how an attacker could exploit the weakness. The technical documentation filled 18 pages complete with code samples and recommended solutions. I knew this discovery could delay our upcoming launches, but client data security was non-negotiable. The next morning, I requested an emergency meeting with the executive team. The conference room felt unusually tense as I presented my findings to CEO Marcus Thornfield, CFO Patricia Williams, and our newly appointed VP of Technology, Linda Garrett. Linda had arrived 6 months earlier from a competitor, bringing impressive credentials and corporate buzzwords that seemed to impress everyone except me. This vulnerability affects every client account in our system, I explained, pointing to the diagrams on the presentation screen. We need to implement a complete authentication overhaul before any major client launches. Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. How long would this take to fix properly? 6 weeks minimum, I replied. We need to redesign the entire security framework, test it thoroughly, and migrate existing data safely. Linda interrupted with a dismissive wave. Gail, I appreciate your thoroughness, but this sounds like unnecessary perfectionism. Our current system has been functioning without issues for 2 years. Perhaps we should focus on moving forward rather than creating problems where none exist. I felt my face flush with frustration. Linda, this is not about perfectionism. This is about protecting our clients from potential data breaches. The vulnerability exists whether we acknowledge it or not. I understand your concerns, Linda replied with a patronizing smile, but we have commitments to meet. Sometimes good enough is better than perfect when deadlines are involved. The meeting ended without resolution, but I knew Linda had already made up her mind. She viewed my discovery as an inconvenience rather than a critical issue that required immediate action. 2 weeks later, Linda announced that her niece Sarah would be joining our team as junior project coordinator. Sarah Garrett was 24 years old, fresh out of college with a business degree and 0 technical experience. During her first team meeting, she spoke confidently about optimizing workflows and streamlining processes, without understanding what our processes actually involved. I'm excited to bring fresh perspectives to this team, Sarah announced, her voice bright with enthusiasm. Sometimes outsider viewpoints can identify inefficiencies that experienced team members might overlook. I watched Tom Rodriguez, our lead developer, exchange glances with other team members. Everyone could see the nepotism, but nobody wanted to address it directly. Tom had been with the company for 3 years and had earned his position through consistent excellence and technical expertise. Seeing Sarah waltz into meetings with no qualifications was demoralizing for everyone who had worked hard to advance their careers. During the following weeks, I noticed Sarah consistently taking credit for ideas generated during team brainstorming sessions. She would listen quietly while others proposed solutions, then reframe those same suggestions as her own insights during meetings with upper management. Her confidence never wavered even when discussing technical concepts she clearly did not understand. The situation escalated when Marcus announced our biggest opportunity yet a comprehensive client management system for Meridian Holdings, a Fortune 500 company with over 50,000 employees. This project would showcase TechFlow's capabilities and could lead to similar contracts with other major corporations. The stakes could not have been higher. Linda immediately began positioning Sarah to receive credit for the project's success. During planning meetings, she would redirect technical questions to Sarah, who would stumble through vague responses before Linda stepped in to clarify. It became painfully obvious that Linda intended to use this high-profile project as a launching pad for Sarah's career advancement. The climactic moment came during a critical security meeting with the entire project team. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation about the authentication vulnerability and my proposed solutions. As I began explaining the technical details, Sarah suddenly interrupted. "Actually, I need to share something important with everyone," she said, standing up with a confident smile. "I have been conducting my own analysis of our system security, and I have identified some potential weak points that require attention." My jaw dropped as Sarah proceeded to present my vulnerability report as her own discovery. She used my exact terminology, referenced my specific code examples, and even repeated my recommended solutions word for word. The only difference was her claim that she had identified these issues during routine system analysis as part of my comprehensive security review. Linda beamed with pride. This is exactly the kind of fresh perspective I was talking about. Sarah's ability to spot these vulnerabilities demonstrates exceptional analytical skills and attention to detail. I sat in stunned silence, watching my months of work being credited to someone who could not even pronounce the technical terms correctly. Tom Rodriguez caught my eye and shook his head in disbelief, but nobody spoke up to correct the record. The meeting ended with Sarah receiving praise for her proactive security assessment, while I was completely ignored. That evening, I sat in my empty office long after everyone had gone home, staring at my computer screen and feeling the first waves of real anger building inside me. This was not just workplace politics anymore. This was theft of my professional work enabled by nepotism and protected by corporate hierarchy. I realized that Linda and Sarah were not just incompetent but actively dangerous to our clients and our company's reputation. 2 months before the launch, I made a decision that would prove crucial to everything that followed. I began meticulously documenting every interaction, every email, every meeting note, and every line of code I wrote. If Linda and Sarah were going to steal my work, I would make sure there was an unbreakable paper trail proving my contributions. I created time-stamped records of all my code commits, archived email chains, and maintained detailed logs of who said what during meetings. My home office became a command center filled with printed documents, backup drives, and organized folders containing months of evidence. It felt paranoid, but I knew I was protecting myself from something much worse than paranoia. My worst fears were confirmed when I discovered that Sarah had been given administrative access to my secure development folders without any authorization or notification. Files that should have been restricted to senior architects were suddenly available to someone with junior coordinator privileges. When I checked the access logs, I found that Sarah had been downloading my work for weeks. I marched straight to Linda's office, my printouts of the unauthorized access in hand. "We need to discuss proper security protocols," I said, placing the evidence on her desk. "Sarah has been accessing files that are far above her security clearance level." Linda glanced at the papers without any sign of concern. "Gail, I appreciate your attention to detail, but we need to foster an environment of collaboration and knowledge sharing. Sarah is eager to learn, and restricting her access would limit her professional growth opportunities." "This is not about limiting growth," I replied firmly. "This is about maintaining proper security protocols and ensuring that sensitive code is only accessible to qualified personnel." "I think you might be overthinking this," Linda said with that same patronizing smile. "Sometimes we need to trust our team members and give them room to contribute. Sarah brings valuable perspectives that complement your technical expertise." The conversation went nowhere. Linda had already decided that security protocols were less important than advancing her niece's career, and no amount of logical argument would change her mind. Over the following weeks, I noticed that other team members were becoming reluctant to share information with me. Tom Rodriguez pulled me aside after a team meeting and explained what was happening. "Linda has been talking to everyone individually," he said quietly. "She is suggesting that you are resistant to collaboration and that sharing ideas with you might lead to conflict. People are scared of getting caught in the middle of whatever is happening between you two. I felt my isolation growing deeper each day. Linda was systematically cutting me off from my own team while positioning herself and Sarah as the reasonable alternatives to my supposed inflexibility. It was a masterful political maneuver that left me powerless to defend myself without appearing to prove their point about my attitude. The situation became more complex when Derek Walsh joined our team as an external security consultant. Derek was hired specifically for the Meridian project, bringing 15 years of experience in corporate cybersecurity. Unlike Sarah, Derek had actual credentials and immediately recognized both my expertise and the severity of the security issues I had identified. "Your analysis of the authentication vulnerability is spot on," Derek told me during our first private conversation. "This is exactly the kind of systematic thinking that prevents major data breaches. Have you presented this to the executive team?" I explained the whole situation, including Linda's dismissal of my concerns and Sarah's theft of my work. Derek listened carefully, occasionally asking technical questions that demonstrated his deep understanding of the problems involved. "This is more serious than I initially realized," he said. "Not just the technical vulnerabilities, but the management issues that are preventing proper security protocols. I need to understand the full scope of what we are dealing with here." Linda immediately began trying to limit Derek's access to me, insisting that all communication should go through Sarah as the project coordinator. This created ridiculous situations where Derek would ask technical questions that Sarah could not answer, forcing her to relay the questions to me and then repeat my responses back to Derek with her own spin. During one particularly frustrating exchange, Derek asked Sarah about encryption key rotation schedules. Sarah stared at him blankly for several seconds before saying, "I will need to consult with our technical team about the specific rotation methodology we employ." Derek looked directly at me. "Gail, what is our current key rotation schedule?" Before I could answer, Sarah jumped in. "Actually, I have been working closely with Gail on optimizing our encryption protocols. We rotate keys every 72 hours using advanced algorithmic scheduling." I had never discussed key rotation with Sarah, and our actual schedule was every 24 hours using standard industry protocols. Derek's expression made it clear that he understood exactly what was happening. I began working late into the night, ensuring that every line of code was absolutely bulletproof, despite the obstacles being placed in my way. My personal notes from this period show the stress I was under, documenting my growing frustration with the political games while maintaining my professional commitment to delivering excellent work. The situation reached a breaking point when Sarah scheduled a client call with Meridian Holdings without any technical backup. I discovered this only when Tom Rodriguez mentioned overhearing her confirm the meeting time with Linda. Sarah had planned to conduct a technical discussion about our system architecture without understanding basic concepts like database normalization or API security. I immediately contacted Derek, who managed to join the call as our security consultant. The meeting was a disaster. Sarah could not answer fundamental questions about data flow, could not explain our backup procedures, and made promises about system capabilities that did not exist. When Meridian's technical team asked about our disaster recovery protocols, Sarah responded with generic corporate speak about robust contingency planning and proactive risk management. Derek had to step in to provide actual technical details, but the damage was already done. The client representatives were clearly confused about who was actually in charge of the technical aspects of their project. After the call ended, Derek sent me an encrypted message. "We need to talk privately about what just happened." The climactic twist came when I received an anonymous email tip from someone inside the company. The message contained a copy of Linda's communication to Meridian Holdings, assuring them that the young woman leading the project had everything under control and that the technical team was fully confident in her leadership. Reading those words felt like being punched in the stomach. Linda was not just allowing Sarah to take credit for my work, but actively misrepresenting her role to our most important client. I realized that Linda planned to completely erase my contributions from the project history and present Sarah as the technical mastermind behind our entire system. That night, I sat in my home office until 3 a.m, organizing all my documentation and preparing for what I now understood would be a battle for my professional survival. The evidence was overwhelming, but I knew that Linda held all the political power and would not hesitate to destroy my career to protect her niece's advancement. 1 month before the launch, I made a strategic decision that would prove to be the key to everything that followed. I created secure backup copies of all critical project files on my personal server, ensuring that I maintained access to the real code repository regardless of what happened to my corporate accounts. This was not sabotage, but professional insurance. I had written most of the core architecture myself, and I knew that the system could not function properly without my specific configurations and security implementations. If Linda and Sarah wanted to erase my contributions, they would discover that my work was not as easily replaceable as they imagined. I approached Derek Walsh privately, sharing my concerns about the project's direction and the dangerous gap between Sarah's claimed expertise and her actual capabilities. Derek had been documenting the same issues from his perspective as an external consultant. "I have been questioning the competence of the project leadership since my second week here," Derek confided. "The technical decisions being made do not align with industry best practices, and the person supposedly in charge cannot answer basic security questions." "Have you shared these concerns with Marcus?" I asked. Derek nodded grimly. "I have been providing regular reports about project status and risk factors. Marcus hired me specifically to provide an independent assessment of our readiness for the Meridian launch." This revelation surprised me. I had not realized that Derek's role extended beyond technical consulting to include management evaluation. It gave me hope that someone in authority was paying attention to the problems that Linda was trying to hide. I decided to bypass Linda and go directly to Marcus Thornfield with my concerns. I scheduled a meeting with his assistant, preparing a comprehensive presentation about the security vulnerabilities and the management issues that were preventing proper resolution. However, Linda intercepted my request and demanded that any concerns about the project go through proper channels. "I am disappointed that you would try to circumvent the established reporting structure," Linda told me during an uncomfortable confrontation in her office. "If you have concerns about the project, you should bring them to me first, so we can address them as a team." "I have been bringing concerns to you for months," I replied. "Every time I raise security issues, you dismiss them as perfectionism or overthinking." "That is not accurate," Linda said with practiced corporate smoothness. "I have been encouraging you to balance technical idealism with practical business requirements. Sometimes we need to accept that perfect is the enemy of good." I knew this conversation was pointless, but I had to try one more time. "Linda, the authentication vulnerability I discovered is not about perfectionism. It is a genuine security risk that could expose client data to unauthorized access." "I appreciate your passion for security," Linda replied, "but I think your concerns might be influenced by resistance to change and difficulty adapting to new team dynamics. Perhaps it would be beneficial for you to speak with Janet in Human Resources about managing workplace stress." The suggestion felt like a threat. Linda was positioning my legitimate technical concerns as personal psychological issues, setting up a narrative that would discredit anything I said in the future. I followed Linda's suggestion and scheduled a meeting with Janet Chen, our HR director. Janet had always seemed sympathetic to employee concerns, but our conversation made it clear that she was constrained by corporate politics. "I understand that you are having some difficulties with the current project structure," Janet said carefully. "Change can be challenging, especially when it involves adjusting to new leadership styles and team members." I explained the technical issues, the nepotism, and the theft of my work. Janet listened politely, but offered only generic advice about working within the team structure and finding constructive ways to voice concerns. "Have you considered that Linda might have different priorities and perspectives that are equally valid?" Janet asked. "Sometimes conflicts arise when people have different working styles rather than fundamental disagreements about goals." I left the HR meeting feeling more isolated than ever. Even Janet, who was supposed to protect employees from unfair treatment, was unwilling to address obvious nepotism and professional misconduct. The corporate system was designed to protect people like Linda and Sarah while leaving people like me vulnerable to political manipulation. The catastrophic test run happened on a Thursday morning in May. Sarah had insisted on conducting a system demonstration for the executive team despite my warnings that the code was not ready for public presentation. She had been making modifications to my original architecture, implementing shortcuts that prioritized speed over security. I watched in horror as the entire system crashed during the live demo. Database connections failed, authentication servers became unresponsive, and error messages cascaded across every screen in the conference room. Marcus Thornfield's expression grew darker with each passing second as Sarah frantically clicked through menus, trying to restore functionality. "What exactly is happening here?" Marcus asked, his voice deadly calm. Sarah's face turned bright red. "We are experiencing some minor technical difficulties. This is normal during development phases when we are optimizing system performance." "This does not look minor," Patricia Williams observed. "How long will it take to restore normal functionality?" Sarah looked around the room desperately before her eyes landed on me. "Gail, can you help us troubleshoot this issue?" I felt every gaze in the room focus on me. This was my moment to either save Sarah from the consequences of her incompetence or let her face the reality of her situation. I chose honesty. "The system crashed because several critical security protocols were disabled," I said clearly. "The authentication framework cannot function properly without the encryption layers that were removed to improve response times." Marcus turned to Linda. "Who authorized these changes to the security protocols?" Linda's political instincts kicked in immediately. "This is part of the natural development process," she said smoothly. "Sarah has been working to optimize system performance based on client requirements. These are growing pains that occur when we push boundaries and innovate." "Growing pains," Marcus repeated. "Our entire client management system just crashed during a demonstration. That seems like more than growing pains." Linda maintained her composure. "I have confidence that Sarah and her team will resolve these issues quickly. Sometimes we need to take calculated risks to achieve breakthrough performance improvements." The meeting ended with promises of rapid fixes and improved testing procedures. Linda announced that Sarah needed more hands-on learning opportunities and would benefit from additional responsibility. In the same breath, she reassigned me from lead architect to senior consultant, effectively removing my authority over technical decisions while keeping me available to fix problems created by others. That afternoon, Tom Rodriguez approached me privately with a warning. "Linda has been building a case against you," he said quietly. "She has been documenting every interaction, every disagreement, every time you questioned her decisions. She is framing it as team disruption, an inability to adapt to new leadership." "What kind of documentation?" I asked. "Meeting notes that describe you as confrontational and resistant to collaboration. Email threads that make it look like you are undermining Sarah's authority. She is creating a narrative that portrays you as the problem rather than the solution." I realized that while I had been documenting technical issues and security concerns, Linda had been documenting my behavior and building a case for my removal. She was playing a completely different game than I was, and she was much better at it than I had anticipated. That evening, I made the decision to send Derek Walsh encrypted copies of the True Code repository and all my documentation. If something happened to me, at least one person would have access to the real technical details and the evidence of what had actually occurred. Derek's response was immediate and reassuring. "I have been documenting the same issues from my perspective. This situation is more serious than Marcus realizes, but I think that is about to change." The climactic twist came during what I thought was a routine security audit. I discovered that Sarah had been granting herself administrative access to systems she had no business touching, including client databases, financial records, and personnel files. When I checked the access logs, I found a pattern of unauthorized access that violated multiple corporate policies and potentially federal privacy regulations. I immediately documented the unauthorized access and prepared a report for Linda following proper channels, despite my growing distrust. Linda's response was swift and devastating. "I am deeply concerned about your behavior, Gail," she said during an emergency meeting the next morning. "This appears to be spying on team members and creating a hostile work environment. Sarah has expressed feeling uncomfortable with your surveillance of her activities." "This is not surveillance," I protested. "This is routine security monitoring that revealed unauthorized access to restricted systems." "I think your perspective might be influenced by personal conflicts with team members," Linda replied. "Sometimes when we feel threatened by new talent, we look for ways to discredit that person rather than examining our own contributions to team dynamics." I realized that Linda had turned my legitimate security concerns into evidence of my supposed psychological problems and professional jealousy. Every attempt I made to protect the company and our clients was being reframed as personal attacks motivated by my inability to accept change. That night, I sat in my car in the TechFlow parking lot, watching the lights in the building and understanding that my time at the company was coming to an end. Linda had orchestrated a perfect political assassination, and I had walked directly into every trap she had set for me. 1 week before the launch, I made my final attempt to present the truth to Marcus Thornfield. I requested an emergency meeting with his assistant, emphasizing the critical security vulnerabilities and the urgent need for executive intervention. I believed that if Marcus understood the real situation, he would make the right decisions to protect the company and our clients. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning, but when I arrived at the conference room, I discovered that Linda had orchestrated an ambush. Janet Chen from Human Resources was present along with Linda and Sarah. Marcus sat at the head of the table with a thick folder of documents spread out in front of him. "Gail, please have a seat," Marcus said, his tone formal and distant. "We need to discuss some serious concerns that have been brought to my attention regarding your recent behavior and performance." My heart sank as I realized what was happening. Linda had used my request for an emergency meeting as an opportunity to present her case against me, framing the meeting as a disciplinary hearing rather than the security briefing I had intended. Linda opened with a prepared presentation about my supposed pattern of insubordination and team disruption. She had compiled months of documentation that painted me as a difficult employee who was resistant to change and hostile toward new team members. "Gail has consistently undermined project leadership," Linda explained, referencing specific examples from her carefully curated files. "She has questioned every decision challenged, every process improvement, and created an atmosphere of negativity that is affecting team morale." "These are not process improvements," I interjected. "These are security vulnerabilities that could expose client data to unauthorized access." Janet Chen consulted her notes. "We have received complaints from team members about your aggressive behavior during meetings and your tendency to dismiss input from colleagues with different perspectives." I looked around the room in disbelief. "Who made these complaints? I would like the opportunity to address specific allegations with specific examples." Linda exchanged glances with Janet. "We need to protect the confidentiality of employees who come forward with concerns about workplace behavior. However, I can tell you that multiple team members have expressed feeling intimidated by your reactions when they offer alternative approaches to technical challenges." The conversation continued with a parade of vague allegations supported by carefully selected evidence. Linda presented email excerpts that made my technical corrections look like personal attacks. She described my security concerns as obsessive perfectionism that prevented the team from meeting important deadlines. The most devastating moment came when Sarah delivered a tearful performance about feeling bullied by my supposedly unrealistic standards and unwelcoming attitude toward new team members. "I have tried so hard to contribute to this project," Sarah said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But every suggestion I make is immediately criticized. Every effort I make to improve our processes is dismissed as inadequate. I feel like I am walking on eggshells, afraid to speak up because anything I say will be torn apart." I watched in amazement as Sarah portrayed herself as the victim of my supposed aggression, while completely ignoring the fact that she had stolen my work and misrepresented her qualifications to clients. Her performance was convincing enough that even Marcus seemed moved by her apparent distress. Marcus turned to me with an expression of disappointment. "Gail, I have always respected your technical abilities, but leadership requires more than expertise. It requires the ability to work effectively with team members, especially those who are still learning and developing their skills." "Marcus, may I present the technical documentation I prepared?" I asked, gesturing toward my folder of evidence. "I think we have heard enough about technical details," Marcus replied. "This meeting is about cultural fit and team harmony. Sometimes excellent individual contributors are not suited for collaborative leadership roles." I felt the walls closing in around me as Marcus delivered his verdict. "After careful consideration of all the evidence presented, I believe it would be best for everyone if we made some changes to the project structure. We need to prioritize team cohesion and create an environment where all team members can contribute without fear of harsh judgment." Linda seized the moment to deliver her killing blow. "I believe Sarah needs the opportunity to grow into her full potential," she announced. "She has demonstrated exceptional analytical skills and strong leadership instincts. Sometimes we hold back promising talent when we are too protective of established hierarchies." "What exactly are you suggesting?" Marcus asked. "I think Gail is too fast and too intense for our current team dynamics," Linda said with practiced corporate diplomacy. "Sarah needs the opportunity to take on greater responsibility and develop her leadership capabilities without feeling overshadowed by more experienced team members. I understood immediately what was happening. Linda was framing my expertise as a barrier to Sarah's development rather than an asset to the project. She was positioning my removal as an act of mentorship rather than what it really was, the elimination of someone who threatened to expose Sarah's incompetence. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I can see the wisdom in giving emerging talent room to grow. Sometimes we need to make difficult decisions about team composition to achieve optimal results. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of corporate euphemisms and diplomatic language. I tried to present my documentation of the security vulnerabilities, but every technical concern I raised was dismissed as evidence of my inability to adapt to collaborative leadership approaches and innovative problem-solving methodologies. The devastating moment came when Marcus announced that my employment with TechFlow Innovations was terminated effective immediately. Security would escort me from the building to ensure a smooth transition and protect the confidentiality of ongoing projects. I want you to know that this decision reflects no judgment about your technical abilities, Marcus said as security guards appeared in the doorway. Sometimes organizational needs require difficult personnel decisions that prioritize team harmony over individual excellence. As the security guards escorted me through the office, I caught Tom Rodriguez's eye. He looked stricken, clearly understanding the injustice of what was happening, but powerless to intervene. Other team members avoided eye contact, embarrassed to witness my public humiliation, but afraid to show any support that might mark them as targets for similar treatment. The final insult came as we passed Linda's office. She was on the phone with someone, and I overheard fragments of her conversation. The transition has been seamless. Sarah has been leading this project from day one. We are confident in our technical leadership. I realized that Linda was already rewriting history, erasing my contributions, and positioning Sarah as the architect of our entire system. By the time I reached the parking lot, my 5 years of excellent service had been reduced to a cautionary tale about the dangers of technical perfectionism and resistance to change. Standing beside my car with a cardboard box of personal belongings, I felt a mixture of rage and determination that I had never experienced before. Linda and Sarah had won this battle through superior political maneuvering, but the war was far from over. I still had access to the real code repository, comprehensive documentation of their incompetence, and one ally inside the company who understood the truth about what was happening. That evening, Derek Walsh sent me an encrypted message. Marcus has been asking me for detailed technical assessments. I think tomorrow is going to be very interesting. Launch day arrived with the kind of gray, drizzling Portland morning that matched my mood perfectly. I had spent the night researching legal options and preparing my defense, but I knew that the next few hours would determine whether justice would prevail or whether Linda and Sarah would complete their successful theft of my professional life. At 6 in the morning, my phone rang with a call from Derek Walsh. His voice was tight with urgency and barely controlled excitement. "Gail, you need to know what is happening here," he said without preamble. Sarah spent yesterday in complete panic, unable to locate the critical files needed for the deployment. She has been frantically searching through backup systems and calling team members at home, but she cannot find the specific configurations that make the system actually work. I felt a grim satisfaction hearing about Sarah's desperation. Did she try accessing my development folders? That is the beautiful part, Derek continued. She has been trying to use your backup files, but they are incomplete without the encryption keys and configuration scripts that you maintain separately. Every time she attempts to deploy the system, it fails spectacularly. I could picture the chaos that must be unfolding in the TechFlow offices. Sarah had stolen my documentation and presentations, but she had never understood the underlying architecture well enough to recreate the functional system. My careful separation of critical components meant that having access to the code files was useless without the knowledge of how to properly configure and deploy them. "What is Linda doing about this?" I asked. Derek's laughter was bitter. "Linda is in full crisis management mode, demanding that Tom and the other developers figure out what is wrong. But nobody else has the deep system knowledge that you developed over months of working with the architecture. They understand their individual components, but you are the only one who knows how all the pieces fit together." My phone buzzed with increasingly frantic text messages from Tom Rodriguez and other team members asking for help with technical issues they could not resolve. On legal advice from the employment attorney I had consulted, I ignored all communication from current TechFlow employees. I could not risk being accused of sabotage or corporate espionage, even though I was the rightful architect of the systems they were trying to deploy. At 7:30, Derek called again with an update that made my pulse quicken with anticipation. "The development team is in open revolt," he reported. "Tom told Linda directly that the system cannot be deployed without Gail's input, and she screamed at him that he was undermining team morale. 3 other developers backed Tom up, saying they had been warning about this situation for weeks." What did Linda say to that? She accused the entire development team of being loyalists to you rather than committed to company success. She actually used the phrase professional jealousy to describe their concerns about technical competence. I marveled at Linda's ability to maintain her delusions, even as reality crashed down around her. She had convinced herself that opposition to her incompetence was really personal animosity toward her leadership style. At 8:15, Marcus Thornfield arrived at the office to personally oversee the launch. Derek was positioned as the external consultant who could speak freely about technical issues without fear of internal political consequences. According to Derek's real-time updates, Marcus was beginning to understand the magnitude of the crisis. Marcus asked Sarah directly whether she could execute the deployment without additional assistance. Derek texted me. Sarah's response was a 5-minute speech about collaborative problem-solving and temporary technical challenges. Marcus asked her 3 times for a yes or no answer about deployment readiness, and she never gave him one. I sat in my car across the street from the TechFlow building, watching expensive cars arrive in the executive parking area. The Meridian Holdings team was arriving for their launch day celebration, completely unaware that the system they expected to go live was currently crashing every time someone tried to start it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Marcus. Linda gave me your number. Call me immediately. The launch is failing, and Derek says you predicted this." I stared at the message for several seconds, hardly believing what I was reading. Marcus Thornfield, CEO of TechFlow Innovations, was reaching out to me directly less than 24 hours after I had been escorted out of the building by security guards. I called the number immediately, and Marcus answered on the first ring. "Gail, I need you to be completely honest with me," he said without any pleasantries. "Derek Walsh has presented me with some very concerning information about the technical leadership of this project. He says that you have been warning about these exact problems for months." "That is correct," I replied carefully. "I documented multiple security vulnerabilities and architectural issues that required resolution before any major client deployment. Why was I not informed about these concerns?" I chose my words carefully. "I attempted to bring these issues to executive attention through proper channels, but they were characterized as technical perfectionism rather than legitimate security concerns." Marcus was quiet for several seconds. "Derek has provided me with copies of technical documentation that appears to show systematic misrepresentation of project status and individual contributions. Is this documentation accurate?" "Yes, it is. Gail, I am going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Can this system be deployed safely today?" I took a deep breath. "Not without the proper security configurations and authentication protocols that I developed. The current system has critical vulnerabilities that could expose Meridian Holdings to significant data security risks." "How long would it take you to implement the proper configurations?" "Assuming I had full system access and administrative authority, approximately 2 hours to deploy the corrected version." Marcus was quiet again, and I could hear voices in the background, including Linda's distinctive corporate tone growing increasingly shrill. "Gail, I am prepared to offer you a consulting contract to resolve this crisis, but I need to know that you can deliver on your promises." "I can deliver," I said with absolute confidence, "but I will require full technical authority and public acknowledgement of my role in resolving the issues." "Agreed," Marcus said immediately. "How quickly can you get here?" I looked across the street at the TechFlow building where my career had been destroyed less than 24 hours earlier. "I can be there in 5 minutes." The climactic twist of this section was Derek's revelation that he had been working with Marcus for weeks to document the entire situation. Derek had not just been a passive observer, but an active investigator building a comprehensive case that would soon bring Linda's house of cards crashing down. As I started my car and drove across the street toward the TechFlow parking garage, I felt a surge of vindication mixed with nervous energy. The next few hours would determine whether competence and integrity could triumph over politics and nepotism, or whether Linda and Sarah would find a way to blame me for the crisis they had created. I walked through the TechFlow lobby with the confidence of someone who knew they held all the cards. The security guards who had escorted me out yesterday now nodded respectfully as I passed, clearly having received instructions about my changed status. The elevator ride to the executive floor gave me time to center myself for what I knew would be a complete reversal of yesterday's humiliation. Marcus met me at the elevator doors personally, his expression a mixture of relief and barely controlled frustration. "Gail, thank you for coming so quickly. We have a situation that requires immediate resolution." As we walked toward the conference room, I could hear Linda's voice rising in pitch as she argued with someone on the phone. Through the glass walls, I could see Sarah sitting at a computer terminal, her face red with stress and her hands shaking as she tried unsuccessfully to execute system commands. "Before we go in there," Marcus said quietly, "I want you to know that Derek has briefed me thoroughly on the technical and management issues that led to this crisis. I understand that serious mistakes were made in how this situation was handled." The conference room door opened to reveal a scene of controlled chaos. Linda was ending a heated phone conversation while Derek stood beside a whiteboard covered with technical diagrams. Tom Rodriguez and 3 other developers sat around the table with laptops open, their expressions relieved when they saw me enter. "Gail," Tom said immediately, "thank goodness you are here. We have been trying to implement the deployment for 4 hours, but the authentication systems keep crashing." Linda's face went through a fascinating progression of emotions as she realized what was happening. First confusion, then recognition, then a mixture of anger and fear as she understood that her carefully constructed narrative was about to collapse. "Marcus, I do not understand why Gail is here," Linda said with forced calm. "We agreed that bringing in external technical support would be the most efficient solution to our current challenges." "Gail is not external technical support," Marcus replied coldly. "She is the architect of this system, and according to Derek's assessment, she is the only person who can resolve the issues that are preventing successful deployment." I moved to the computer terminal where Sarah had been working and immediately saw the problems. Sarah had been attempting to use incomplete configuration files without the proper encryption keys or security protocols. Every deployment attempt was failing because critical components were missing or incorrectly configured. "Sarah, may I see what you have been trying to execute?" I asked politely. Sarah's response was barely audible. "I have the deployment files, but they are not working properly. There seem to be some missing components." I pulled up the system logs and quickly identified multiple critical errors. The authentication framework is failing because the encryption protocols are not properly configured. The database connections are timing out because the security certificates are missing. The API endpoints are not responding because the authorization tokens are incorrectly formatted. Derek stepped forward with a folder of documents. "Marcus, this might be a good time to review the technical assessment I prepared regarding the project leadership structure." Linda's political instincts kicked in immediately. "Derek, I think we should focus on resolving the immediate technical issues rather than conducting post-mortems about management decisions." "Actually," Marcus said firmly, "I think we need to address both issues simultaneously. Derek, please proceed with your assessment." Derek opened his folder with the satisfaction of someone who had been waiting for this moment. "Over the past month, I have documented systematic misrepresentation of technical capabilities, unauthorized access to secure systems, and fundamental misunderstanding of basic cybersecurity principles by the designated project leadership." Linda tried to interrupt. "Derek, I think your assessment might be influenced by incomplete information about our collaborative management approach." "My assessment is based on direct observation of technical competence," Derek continued. "The person designated as project lead demonstrated inability to answer basic questions about system architecture, made unauthorized changes to security protocols, and misrepresented the contributions of team members to external clients." Marcus turned to Sarah with a direct question. "Sarah, can you explain to me how the database authentication system works?" Sarah's face went blank. She looked desperately at Linda, then at the computer screen, then back at Marcus. "The database authentication uses secure protocols to verify user credentials through encrypted connections." "That is a completely generic description," Marcus said. "Can you tell me specifically how our authentication differs from standard industry implementations?" Sarah was silent for 10 seconds before Linda attempted to rescue her. "Sarah has been focused on project coordination rather than low-level technical implementation details. She was designated as project lead," Marcus replied. The project lead should understand the technical implementation of the systems they are responsible for deploying. I realized this was my moment to demonstrate the difference between real expertise and corporate buzzwords. Marcus, would you like me to execute the proper deployment procedure so you can see how the system is supposed to function? Please proceed, Marcus said. I spent the next 2 hours methodically implementing the security configurations and deployment procedures that I had developed over months of careful planning. Every step was documented and explained, demonstrating not just what needed to be done, but why each component was necessary for proper system functionality. The transformation was remarkable. Systems that had been crashing for hours suddenly stabilized. Database connections that had been timing out began responding instantly. Security protocols that had been failing began functioning exactly as designed. By 11 o'clock, we had a fully operational system ready for client deployment. The Meridian Holdings executives arrived for their launch presentation just as I was completing the final system tests. Marcus introduced me as the lead architect who has been instrumental in developing the technical foundation for this project. During the presentation, the Meridian team asked sophisticated technical questions that demonstrated their deep understanding of enterprise software implementation. I answered each question with specific details about our architecture security protocols and performance optimization strategies. This is exactly the kind of technical depth we were hoping to see, said Robert Chen, Meridian's Chief Technology Officer. We have worked with several vendors who promised similar capabilities, but few have demonstrated this level of systematic thinking about security and scalability. After the presentation, Robert approached me directly. I have to ask, why was not leading this project from the beginning? Based on today's discussion, you clearly have the expertise and vision that we need for our enterprise implementation. The question hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus, Linda, and Derek all heard it, and everyone understood the implications. The client was directly questioning why the most qualified person had not been in a leadership position for their project. Linda made one last desperate attempt to maintain her narrative. Gail has been an important contributor to the technical development, but Sarah brought valuable project coordination skills that helped us integrate multiple perspectives into a cohesive solution. Robert looked confused. I am sorry, but during today's presentation, Sarah did not contribute any technical input. All the detailed answers came from Gail. If Sarah was coordinating the project, why does she not seem familiar with the technical decisions that were made? The moment of truth had arrived. Marcus looked directly at Linda and delivered the verdict that ended her political maneuvering once and for all. I think there have been some significant misunderstandings about the leadership structure of this project, Marcus announced. Effective immediately, I am implementing a restructuring that will ensure proper alignment between technical expertise and project authority. Linda's face went pale as she realized that her carefully constructed empire was collapsing in real time. Marcus, I think we should discuss any organizational changes privately, rather than making hasty decisions during client meetings. The decisions are not hasty, Marcus replied. They are based on extensive evaluation of project performance and technical competence. Derek has provided comprehensive documentation that supports the need for immediate structural changes. Derek stepped forward with another folder. Marcus asked me to prepare specific recommendations for project leadership that would ensure successful completion of the Meridian implementation and future client engagements. The climactic twist came when Marcus publicly announced that Linda and Sarah would be stepping away from client-facing responsibilities immediately to allow for optimization of technical project management. The corporate euphemisms barely concealed the reality that both Linda and Sarah were being removed from positions they had never been qualified to hold. As the Meridian executives prepared to leave, Robert shook my hand personally. We look forward to working with you directly on the implementation rollout. It is refreshing to work with a vendor who has both technical depth and clear project leadership. I realized that Derek had been building this case for weeks, with Marcus's full knowledge and support. The morning's crisis had not been an unexpected disaster, but the inevitable conclusion of a carefully orchestrated investigation into Linda's mismanagement and Sarah's incompetence. Standing in the conference room where I had been humiliated just days earlier, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from watching justice finally prevail over politics. The truth had emerged, competence had been recognized, and the people who deserved consequences for their actions were finally facing them. The aftermath of the launch day confrontation unfolded with the swift efficiency that corporate environments reserve for situations where executive credibility is at stake. Within 3 days, Linda Garrett submitted her resignation to pursue other opportunities, and the company-wide announcement carefully avoided any details about the circumstances surrounding her departure. Sarah's situation was handled with slightly more discretion, reflecting her junior status and family relationship to Linda. She was quietly transferred to a non-technical role in the marketing department, where her lack of technical expertise would be less dangerous, and her enthusiasm for corporate buzzwords might actually be useful. Her probationary status was clearly understood by everyone involved, though never explicitly stated in official communications. The Tuesday morning after the launch, Marcus Thornfield requested a private meeting in his office. I entered the spacious corner suite with a mixture of vindication and curiosity, wondering how he would address the systematic failures that had nearly destroyed our most important client relationship. "Gail, I owe you both an apology and an explanation," Marcus began without his usual corporate diplomacy. "Derek was hired specifically to assess the technical competence of our project leadership, not just to provide security consulting. I had concerns about Linda's management style and Sarah's qualifications, but I needed objective documentation before I could act." This revelation reframed everything that had happened over the past month. Derek had not been a passive observer of the political dynamics, but an active investigator gathering evidence for Marcus's review. My documentation and technical expertise had been crucial, but Derek's independent assessment had provided the corroboration that Marcus needed to justify major personnel changes. "Why did you not intervene sooner?" I asked. Marcus's expression grew serious. "Corporate leadership requires careful evidence gathering before making decisions that affect people's careers. I suspected that there were problems, but I needed comprehensive documentation to support major structural changes. Your termination was the final piece of evidence I needed to understand the full scope of the mismanagement." The irony was remarkable. My firing had not been the end of my career at TechFlow, but the catalyst that exposed Linda's incompetence and triggered the investigation that would ultimately vindicate my technical judgment and professional integrity. "Derek recommended that I offer you a significant promotion with expanded authority over technical project management," Marcus continued. "How would you feel about the position of Director of Technical Security?" The title represented not just career advancement, but recognition that technical expertise should drive technical decisions, rather than being subordinated to political considerations. I accepted immediately, understanding that this role would give me the authority to prevent future situations like the one Linda had created. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase and equity package that reflected the value that my expertise had demonstrated during the crisis. More importantly, it came with the explicit authority to establish technical standards and security protocols that could not be overridden by non-technical management. Tom Rodriguez became my deputy director, finally receiving the recognition his years of excellent work deserved. Our first initiative was establishing new protocols that would prevent nepotism and ensure that technical oversight remained with qualified personnel. The new structure included mandatory technical competency requirements for anyone in a project leadership role. Within 6 weeks, we had successfully completed the Meridian Holdings implementation ahead of schedule and under budget. The client was so impressed with the professionalism and technical depth of our approach that they extended their contract to include 2 additional system integrations and recommended TechFlow to 3 other Fortune 500 companies. Janet Chen approached me privately to discuss the lessons learned from the Linda Garrett situation. Her investigation revealed that several other employees had experienced similar problems with nepotism and political favoritism, but had been afraid to report their concerns through official channels. "Your case has prompted us to implement new HR policies that provide better protection for employees who report competency and ethical concerns," Janet explained. "We are establishing independent review processes that cannot be influenced by the managers who are being reported." These policy changes represented systematic improvements that would benefit future employees who found themselves in situations similar to mine. The company was learning from its mistakes and implementing safeguards to prevent political manipulation from overriding professional competence. Derek Walsh accepted a permanent position as Senior Security Advisor, bringing his extensive experience and objective perspective to our expanding technical team. Our collaboration during the crisis had demonstrated the value of having external expertise that could provide independent assessment of internal projects. Your systematic documentation and technical integrity made this investigation possible, Derek told me during one of our weekly security briefings. Without your evidence and willingness to stand up for professional standards, Linda might have continued her mismanagement indefinitely. The personal growth I experienced during this ordeal extended far beyond professional advancement. I had learned the critical importance of documenting everything in corporate environments, maintaining professional integrity, even when it seems hopeless, and building strategic alliances with people who share similar values about competence and honesty. My relationship with my father improved significantly once my financial security was restored and enhanced. The stress of potential unemployment had been affecting my ability to provide the healthcare support he needed, but the promotion and equity package gave me the resources to ensure his comfort during his ongoing treatment. 6 months later, I received a handwritten thank you note from Robert Chen at Meridian Holdings, expressing appreciation for the exceptional technical leadership and professional integrity that had made their system implementation so successful. The note mentioned that they had specifically requested that TechFlow assign me to lead their upcoming expansion projects. The long-term satisfaction of this experience came not just from personal vindication, but from the knowledge that professional competence had ultimately triumphed over political manipulation. The company was stronger, the clients were better served, and future employees would be protected from the kind of systematic abuse that Linda had attempted to institutionalize. Standing in my new office with its view of the Portland skyline, I reflected on the journey from humiliation to vindication. The experience had taught me that integrity and competence supported by careful documentation and strategic thinking can overcome even the most sophisticated political maneuvering. The final validation came when 3 other technology companies approached me with executive offers based on my reputation for technical excellence and crisis management. While I chose to remain at TechFlow, the external recognition confirmed that my professional standing had not only been restored, but significantly enhanced by the way I had handled the crisis. Tom Rodriguez often reminded me that our story had become legend within the company, serving as an example of how technical integrity and professional courage could overcome even the most entrenched political obstacles. New employees were informally advised to document their work carefully and never compromise technical standards for political convenience. The life lesson that emerged from this experience was profound and multi-layered. Professional integrity requires not just doing excellent work, but also having the courage to defend that work when it comes under attack. Documentation and evidence are essential tools for protecting yourself in corporate environments where politics can override performance. Building alliances with people who share your values is crucial for surviving and thriving in complex organizational environments. Derek's support had been instrumental in my vindication, but that support came because he recognized and respected my commitment to technical excellence and professional honesty. Most importantly, I learned that temporary setbacks, even devastating ones like termination, can become opportunities for growth and advancement if you maintain your principles and continue working toward long-term goals. Linda's attempt to destroy my career had ultimately resulted in my promotion to a position with greater authority and recognition than I had ever held before. 1 year later, as I reviewed architectural plans for TechFlow's expansion into international markets, I felt deep gratitude for the experience that had tested and ultimately strengthened my professional character. The crisis had revealed not just my technical capabilities, but my resilience, strategic thinking, and commitment to excellence under pressure. Derek and I maintained regular communication about industry trends and security challenges, and our friendship had grown from the mutual respect developed during our collaboration. His final assessment of the situation was characteristically direct. Competence and integrity always win in the long run, but sometimes you have to be patient while the politics sort themselves out. Have you ever found yourself in a workplace situation where you had to choose between staying quiet and speaking up for what was right? I would love to hear about how you handled situations where your professional integrity was tested. Please share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, I would appreciate it if you would like this video and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming workplace challenges and professional growth. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and remember that your expertise and integrity are your most valuable professional assets. No matter how challenging your current situation might seem, stay true to your principles and keep documenting your excellent work. The truth has a way of emerging when you least expect it, and competence always finds a way to triumph over politics in the end.